Today, let's talk about something I've noticed in almost every Game Master group I've been a part of, especially among folks who've been running games for years, and that's random encounter tables. They're everywhere. They're in published modules, old school supplements, monster manuals, and yet many GMs just don't use them anymore. Why is that? Well, today I'll tell you why I think it is, and we'll sort of see if we agree or if I can give you any new insights. But welcome back to Whispers from the Phylactery, where we dive into tabletop topics such as design, monster lore, and game running to help inspire your next game session. So let's grab a drink, settle in, and I'll share what random encounter tables are, why they were so popular, and now why some GMs move away from them, and whether they still have a place at your table. So, first part, what are random encounter tables? For those newer to the hobby, random encounter tables are lists of possible events or creature encounters you roll for, often during travel or downtime exploration. The game runner, or a player when asked, rolls a d20 or d100, really just depends on the list itself, to see what comes up and what challenges the party. For example, while your party travels through a forest, you roll and it's a group of bandits sitting around a campfire talking about their latest haul or rumor, or you encounter a wandering unicorn, or it might be even a mysterious druid circle mid-ritual. These random events could be beneficial to the party, they could be neutral, or they could be actively harmful. But being realistic, it was heavily skewed, in my opinion, towards negative interactions depending on the supplement or the list creator, with some lists just being downright cruel as you start in Dungeons and Dragons and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Like, oh, you rolled a 1 on the random encounter? Well, that's Abadrach the Engulfing, the ancient black worm who lives in the region. That's a shame. What are you guys going to do now? So, random encounter tables, at least in the method that we kind of know for our purpose, originated in early D&D as a way to simulate the unpredictability of dangerous worlds, keeping travel tense and resource management meaningful. So why did GMs use them? Random encounters had some key purposes. One, they created risk. Travel wasn't just seen as scenery. Players had to prepare, watch for danger, and track rations or spells. After you had finished a dungeon, part of the adventure was also how do you get your loot back to town? And what if there's too much loot for you to carry? You have to pick and choose, because if you leave it here, chances are it's not going to be here when you come back. 2, random lists and added emergent storytelling. A random troll encounter might lead to negotiating safe passage, or an injured animal might reveal poachers in the area. And 3 is that they reduced prep needs. Instead of designing every encounter in advance, GMs could roll and improvise, adding depth on the fly. So in earlier editions of D&D, it was sort of thought that random tales were almost mandatory. Modules even specified how often to roll on the tables that they provided. But for this, we sort of need to understand the D&D of yesteryear, which was very different than how role-playing games are generally played and designed today. Dungeons and Dragons and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons started off as essentially miniature tabletop battle games. Instead of fielding armies, you fielded your character, your hero, against the opponents that the dungeon master provided. There might have been a bit of story, but the main focus was on conquering the module, whether that was a dungeon or a mystery exploration, and being able to boast about it. It was a sign of... words don't always work. It was a sign of accomplishment to survive a hard module that other players had died to. This isn't true of every module, of course, but it was a heavy design choice of that time. So looking at why GMs ignore them now, or, well, I wouldn't say ignore, they've changed. A lot of people do ignore them. These are some of the main reasons that I've seen, or the common reasons, or that I've personally decided on. Of course, they don't apply to every game runner or storyteller, but there are a few similarities between them. And going into it, one, they can break narrative flow. If your party is deep in emotional roleplay, unraveling mysteries, or treading towards words, they are heading towards an urgent goal, a sudden unrelated owlbear ambush can derail pacing and tension. If a group is focused on their plot or their story, then they want encounters that are tied to that story rather than interruptions that dilute focus to something that is really not that necessary. Number two, they consume valuable session time. Because let's be real, combat encounters especially can eat up a huge chunk of your session. When it's a random encounter with no narrative relevance, then it can end up just feeling like filler content, which sometimes it is. If you're rolling randomly and you don't know, it is filler content. Then players will pick up on it. And it just delays what the players are curious about. So GMs that might have a bit more experience, or they've been running a few games, they start to question, is the encounter worth the time it takes away from our session for the story that it adds? Because if a combat might take an hour or two in D&D or Pathfinder or the crunchy systems, then is it mandatory? What's the purpose? We fought a wolf ambush on the way through the forest when we could have already been assaulting the orc camp at the other end. Like, this session was kind of a bummer, DM. Like, all we did was fight wolves and travel. So that isn't to say that you only need key highlight encounters, but it sort of leads into the next part where, number 3, the roll tables can feel artificial, where rolling on a table and suddenly dropping in a creature can feel forced, especially if it doesn't match the environment, the tone, or the established world building of what you're going for. So, I mean, if you're traveling through a grimdark setting and you just use a random fantasy table out of a supplement book and you're like, yes, this will be great, 100 encounters for traveling, and it ends up being something that doesn't fit at all. If you're traveling through Barovia and the Curse of Strahd and you have a random supplement, we'll just say, because you're not using the ones in the back of the book for some reason, and it says, you encounter a unicorn. Why is there a unicorn in Barovia? It doesn't fit. Too much sunshine when things are bleak and awful. But the same goes in reverse. If you have a horror supplement with a list of things that can go wrong, and you're running a light action-y adventure, then wiggling the camera. Then on your quest to rescue Princess Guinevere from the dragon's stronghold, you come across a village being pilfered by bandits who are butchering the townsfolk. Also doesn't really fit the theme of what you're going for. So that's kind of it for that one, is they can feel artificial and forced. Number 4 is a lot of GMs prefer planned foreshadowing, where I know me personally and a lot of people I've talked to like to weave encounters into the story's themes, the villain schemes, or the characters' arcs, which random tables rarely provide this level of cohesion because it is a random game. For example, instead of a random goblin scout group, a game master might add, this scout group is part of the goblin warband foreshadowed by the clues in town, showing their encroachment into the party's territory. They're threatening the farmlands. The clues might be XYZ, expanding on what those are, instead of just, here's 5 goblins, they're a scouting party, what relevance do they have to the plot? Who knows? Who cares? They're here, kill them. Go forth. Be murder hobos. I don't know. And then reason number 5 that GMs might not use them is when you've been running games for a while, a lot of game runners or storytellers often develop the ability to improvise encounters without rolling for them. If travel feels too smooth, they'll introduce a narrative events that fits their goals for the session. And when you've internalized enough encounter logic for the system that you're choosing to play, then the rolling can feel unnecessary. And this is something that's hard to force. It just builds with experience in a system and your overall game mastery skill, where you start to learn, like, well, this will be about even for this level. I don't really have to do any double checking. It's the party's level 5, so I'm going to toss a few of these at them, and maybe this guy, which it's hard to force the knowledge in. It's just through reading and experience, and you just kind of get used to it. Yeah. So that's why people I've seen stop using them, or why I stop using them. But going into number 4, so do random encounters still have a place? And are random encounters obsolete? No, I don't think so. It depends on the type of game I'm running, whether it's a political mystery or an action adventure, but I still use random encounter tables. Even as I've been running games for 15 years, they're useful. And I mean, these are the reasons I find them useful. Number 1, random encounters do reinforce the idea that the world exists beyond the players. It's alive, it's unpredictable, and they're just one part of it. This part has been the true and core tenet of game design for many years. Well, it seems to ebb and flow what is the focus of the game, whether it's on the hero specifically and it's just their story, or whether the world around them is alive. But random encounter tables can help that unpredictability, with caveats, which we'll get to. Number 2, inspiration for improvised stories. So rolling on a random encounter can spark ideas you wouldn't have prepared, adding freshness and surprise into your sessions. Generally, if I do my rolling before a game session. So I'll pull up a list. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be doing for that day, or I need more ideas, so I'll roll in advance and see what pops up. And then I will take that and work it into my story in advance, so I'm not doing so on the fly. It's less filler content. Well, there's still filler content, but it's behind the screen, not in front of the screen at the table. Basically, it's if the brain is having trouble, it gives you a little bit of a jump start. Where it's just like, man, I don't know what I want to do. I'll roll 3 times on the random table, see what sparks. If I like one of the ideas, I'll run with it. Number 3, resource drain in survival games. This one's pretty focused and niche, but in games focused on travel hardships, random encounters maintain danger and force players to manage supplies and spells wisely. But this is a very specific style of game, and it should never be a surprise to the players that the person running the game is going to use this mechanic. This should be session 0. We are going to run a survival style game. It's going to have these kind of themes, and you're going to be expected to track food, ammo, supplies. Random encounters will happen from time to time. They might be beneficial, they might hurt you. It needs to be known in advance that you're going to be doing this, because no one likes being asked to track ammo and food rations and all that by surprise. It's awful. Number 4, quick filler content for sandbox play. Let's be honest, in sandbox campaigns where players can choose unexpected direction, random tables can provide immediate content without prep. Let's be real, players can always decide they want to open a door marked number 3 when you only presented doors 1 and 2. It's the nature of sandbox play. If the party heads off to the right into the craggy mountains, and all you had was like noble manners in the village over to the left. Well, time to break out that encounter table and see what you got. Of course, I try and do it ahead of time, but you can't always prepare. So, how do you use them well? So, I know that the reasons I just gave for using random encounter tables were exactly like the list of reasons not to use random encounter tables, and that's true. Every game runner likes to do things a little bit differently. What doesn't work for someone might work wonders for someone else. But personally, for me, it really comes down to how the tables are used. If you do want to use random encounter tables, and I didn't dissuade you with the cons, then here are some tips to make them feel more intentional rather than disruptive. I touched on it a little bit before, but we're going to be going over it more now. So number one, a big thing I like to do before I pull out any table is curate your table. Modify or create your own tables to fit your specific campaign themes. The setting lore or the villain factions. I don't like to just use generic wilderness encounters if they don't fit into what I'm trying to do. So while third-party books and lists are great and they look great, they have their place. When I'm trying to set a theme for a story, the published material is just going to be too generic. So I ran a Viking style game recently, and encountering a unicorn or a dragon would have been, well, it would have been real weird for the setting I envisioned and what the players agreed to. So instead, I would fill the encounter table with meeting other groups of Viking raiders, or meeting a lone mythological creature that is highlighted in Norse or Scottish or English mythology. Or it could be druids conducting a ceremony over asking the spirits or the gods for help. So the lists were always tailored into to the box I wanted. Saying that, generic tables are great. If you have a list of 100, you can pick out the 20 that you like that fit your theme and just be like, yep, these are the 20 I'm going to roll on. Roll a d20. Books and splat books give great inspiration. It's true, it's what they're there for. Use the work of other people. It's there for a reason. Of course, if it's paid work, pay for the work. Number two, roll ahead of time. This is something I mentioned before, but instead of interrupting gameplay to do the rolling on the random table, roll before the session. Decide when these encounters might occur and weave them in narratively to the story rather than as pure randomness, which I just hate randomness altogether. It bugs me. Not the randomness of rolling dice, but the randomness of like magical items, the Rod of Wonder. If anything is as good for the party as it is bad for the party, I tend not to like it as a player and a GM. Just because I've seen it backfire so often and my luck with dice is awful. So I try to get rid of it. Circling back around, using the Viking example again, if I know that I want my party to explore a valley, it's a secluded valley, they'll need to spend a few hours in it looking for a forgotten temple and the cult that resides there, I will roll 4 or 5 encounters ahead of time just to give it a bit of ease so I'm not thinking of them on the fly. And I don't need to think too hard in advance, like, well, what kind of story, what encounter do I want? I'm like, well, here's my list. Roll 5. I'll take these 3. And then, perfect. They'll hit them. Ding, ding, ding. It works. It flows. It helps the brain juice. So, part of that, building off of it, is making every encounter meaningful, which is something I'm a big fan of. Even a random wolf attack can foreshadow druidic tensions, famine-driven wildlife aggression, or signs of a deeper corruption spreading through the land. Rolling before the game also gives you a chance to give this aspect some thought, instead of just sitting there sweating as the players ask you question after question that you don't know the answer to because you just rolled it off a table and tossed it in front of them. I mean, you probably still won't know the questions, but you'll have more answers than you would. Another tip for using curated tables: use non-combat encounters. Tables can include weather changes, environmental discoveries, traveling merchants, or omens. Encounters that add flavor without combat and only take a few minutes at the table, but help highlight the world around the players. There is a pretty big difference between like a table where everything is combat and a table where it's like, well, a quarter of it is combat, a quarter of it is environmental changes. Well, then not a quarter. Like 10 things are environmental changes, although you might have like a mini table that's just environment. Other things in combat are good too. That's kind of what I'm just trying to say with that one. And then part of curated tables and rolling in advance is you can use them to tie players' backstories together. If a random travel encounter involves an NPC, you could make that an NPC from a character's past, or a monster linked to the warlock's patron or the cleric's divine mission. Randomness with a guiding hand becomes personal and story relevant. So looking at sort of my final thoughts and summary here, why do some game runners ignore random encounter tables? Often it's because they want to prioritize story cohesion, player agency, and intentional pacing over the chaotic nature of random events. But that doesn't mean that random encounters have no value. They're a tool, one among many that are a great fit in a storyteller's toolkit. The real skill is knowing when and how to use them to enhance your table's experience, not distract from it or bog it down. So, in the end, I hope this gave you a bit of thought looking at how random encounter tables fit into prep for your games and a little bit of the design philosophy. If you'd like a follow-up video on how to build your own meaningful random encounter table, I keep shaking the camera, I can do a video where I walk through my process or an example of encounter tables tailored for wilderness travel, urban mystery, or planar adventure. Let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for spending time with me today. If you enjoy what I'm hoping is a fairly relaxed conversation about tabletop role-playing games, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell so that you are informed of the next episode. Until next time, may your encounters be meaningful, your travels safe, and your adventures always filled with wonder. So long, adventurers.